To the ILWU, and let's remember an injury to one is an injury to all, and we think about that both in the physical injuries. The brothers explained to us from the Muni about the stress injuries, and then we have to think about much broader injuries that happen to the environment, to workers across the world, to the people on the receiving ends of imperialism's need to control the resources around the world that result in the deaths of workers every day from drones piloted maybe from Nevada over Pakistan, from imperialist troops who are hitting the ground in Libya today when workers across North Africa are trying to take their lives back into their own hands. When I started thinking about coming here today, I started thinking, well, what do we want to talk about? Separation. I'm a health and safety officer. I could talk to you all day long about regulations. I live for them, from about 8 in the morning till 10 when I can still read them. These gentlemen from OSHA write them in, and like we learned today, a lot of them come right out of the workers' struggle and the workers' experience. On regulation, just a point I wanted to make, regulations are written in blood. And they are the point of the class struggle. When someone gets cut in half at work, there's a violation of a regulation, or there's a regulation that needs to be written. If somebody's smelling diesel in the drive house of your crane, then there's a violation of a regulation, or a regulation needs to be written. I would be remiss if I didn't mention a brother from my own union who was killed this last year. You think, oh, we're scientists, we're safe in our nice little offices and piles of regulations. What are we going to get, a paper cut or something? One of our brothers in the California Association of Professional Scientists went down in a helicopter this year doing the work of public safety out in the Department of Forestry. Much to my remiss, I do not have his name, and to that I feel that I missed today, because I just remembered when I came here that yes, this affects everybody. Public safety affects everybody. As a public worker, a few things I want to mention. In the state of California, I work at the Department of Public Health. We've been on furlough for 2 years. So what happens when they put scientists who are working on your public health on furlough? Is there work that we're supposed to be doing to protect the public health on those days? Yes, indeed there is. And this is why it's a much bigger question than just getting out and changing a Schwarzenegger for a Brown, or getting out there and getting a Brown instead of a Meg Whitman. Because the whole structure is set up for this clash over what's going to happen when we're selling our labor power day by day. How quickly are we going to be pressed to do that? Now, I'm a socialist, and I feel I'm very confused because the Republican got up and called for a general strike. That leaves me with the question of, what is a socialist supposed to do in a time like today? We have a labor council in San Francisco full of socialists, and we have a leadership in the San Francisco Labor Council that works to tie us to the Democratic Party. And this is repeated across the country, The question of how are we going to confront an issue of worker safety when the driving force is the market that demands that workers are going to work harder and faster. And with, a half shift so that we can make sure they don't go home a few minutes early in those cases. Is worker safety possible under capitalism? I argue it's not. If there's not workers' control and workers' power at the point of production, we're going to have workers' Memorial Days until the end of capitalism. And then we'll probably have them for a few more years afterwards just to remember so we don't go back. But the issue that we're facing here in California is, and not just California, across the country, is what are we going to do about this? Because right now we're under major attack. I have here a article, and I'm not going to read it to you, just to give you an idea. This is from Dr. Rose, the last medical doctor in Cal OSHA. And say, the International Labor Organization calls for an inspector-to-worker ratio in developed industrial countries of 1 to 10,000. In California, the inspector ratio is 1 to 92,000. That's why the employers are not afraid of OSHA, because they know they can get away with it. You might be a worker your whole career in unsafe conditions and never see an OSHA inspector. That's why I'm saying, at the point of production, that's the class struggle over what you're going to get out of me. Can I go home at the end of my workday and be with my family in a safe condition and live out my life, or am I going to be an injured worker? Well, the situation is not very good for the average worker. I have people come up to me. I'm a health and safety officer, so I have a responsibility to do inspections. And somebody comes up to me, wants to talk to me on the side, doesn't want to tell me their name. They're scared to bring up their issue to their employer. I work in Department of Public Health. I'm not going to get into details there. I'm not going to be a whistleblower. That's not the issue at hand here. The issue is that we are being squeezed. We're supposed to be protecting the public, and we see this across the board. How are the workers that are supposed to protect our facilities and work in our facilities supposed to be safe when they're losing their hours? They're demoralized. This is what's happening. Are they going to be safe? Are they thinking about? No, they're thinking about, how am I going to make up for the lost money from 1, 2, 3 years of furloughs? I don't want to get into that too much. So what's the response? What can we actually do? Well, my theme was supposed to be separation, and I wanted to tie together a few things, and that's why I started with the international situation. We just saw a movie yesterday about fracking. Anybody see Gasland? Yeah. This is something to think about, because this is public health. We've turned over the extraction of gas to these gas companies, and they go in and they pump in a mixture of 600 different chemicals into the ground with water to blow apart the shale layer, and in the process they're destroying the aquifers all across the country. Anybody has time to watch this movie, watch it. Separation, that's affecting what the workers are going to drink all across the country. We know that the majority of us are workers, whether we're in unions or not, whether we have somebody to represent us. The brother was saying he had nobody to represent him. He had to go up by himself, and they say you can't even make a complaint for the other workers because you're not a union. That's the condition of the majority of the workers in this country. I argue it's not sustainable. Capitalism requires the exploitation of workers, and the regulations are written in a battle between the individual workers who need their health and the insurance companies who are trying to figure out how little can I get away with in case of a worker's death. That's where the bottom line is. Now, there's benevolent bureaucrats like myself and the brother from OSHA who try with our best intentions to struggle for a good regulation. But the reality is those regulations are an expression of the class struggle. And they will go on until one class is victorious or the other. And right now, we are being beaten back. This article by Dr. Larry Rose, which was on Indie Media, he said there were 5 doctors at Cal OSHA Now there's 0. Where I work, there were 3 industrial hygienists doing my job, and now there's 1. This is an indication of, and that's in public health. That's not even in the private industry where the pressure is even more enormous. We're not under the type of pressure to produce like you are, to crank out widgets every day. We're under a very different type of pressure. But I would argue that this is the nature of capitalism. Capitalism must force the most out of every worker, and if they can't get it, they will move it somewhere else. I was looking at a little picture today. We have a nice little container in our break room, what to do with your batteries. So at the end of the day, I measure my batteries after I do my checks, because I go around and check things. I use batteries and put them in there, and they go somewhere. They go away. Well, I saw a nice little picture today of an Indian worker, not Native American, Indian worker, a child. They get a collection of these batteries, take them out behind the house on a little rock, pounding them away, bare feet, bare hands, separating it out to separate out the metals that are retrievable. This is the nature of our economy. This will continue as long as capitalism continues. It must, because capitalism is voracious. And it's up to us to tie in the struggle against workers' health, for workers' health and safety, to the struggle to defeat capitalism. Because short of that, all the regulations you write don't matter. We're going to fire the regulators. Don't matter if somebody wants to complain, we'll get rid of them too. There might be a regulation on the book for it, but that doesn't mean the worker who uses it is going to be safe. So we're in a situation where we have trade union leadership that ties the entire working class to the Democratic Party. We saw a bit of an uprising in Wisconsin, and this was very powerful. The workers occupied the state capitol. And I was so inspired when I saw the ILWU actually shut down the ports of Oakland in solidarity with the workers in Wisconsin and with all public workers, being a public worker myself. Because that's the type of exemplary action that's necessary to challenge the rule of the capitalist class. In 2 weeks, the California Teachers Association is going to be marching on the capital of Sacramento. There's a lot of discussion whether they're going to occupy the capital or not. Is this going to be turned into a strike movement or not? Well, what happened in Wisconsin? What's the potential for it sparking off here? What can we do? In Wisconsin, we started hearing the president of the firemen's union saying we need a general strike. We started hearing that the polls were 30–40% of the people interviewed on the street were talking about general strike. But what happened? The union leaderships told everybody, take this clipboard and start this recall campaign. So we're going to recall the bad politicians, and then we're going to vote in some new politicians, and it'll all be better. That's called defusing the movement. That's called not having faith in the ability of the working class to express itself through the forms that the workers use internationally. And that's self-organization, strikes and general strikes, factory occupations, until we get workers' power. That's the struggle we're in. It's either going to be workers' deaths or workers' power. So I advocate that everyone in favor of workers' power, against workers' deaths, for health and safety on the job, organized to drive out the bureaucrats in our trade union leaderships that tie us to the Democrats. Start to fight for our independent workers' party and advance issues of workers' control at the point of production. If your union isn't organizing correctly, form a rank-and-file caucus, form an inter-union committee, bring workers together, and start to take action. We're going up to Sacramento in 2 weeks. Right now, there's a struggle inside of the CTA, and a number of people want to try to diffuse it, and a number of people want to advance it. We're going to see if California can be the next Wisconsin. It's going to take Wisconsin, California, state after state to turn this around. And it's going to take occupations, not just of political centers, but occupations of job sites, strikes, and general strikes. Short of that, I'm sorry to say, we are in a crisis that cannot be resolved by the capitalist class. Humpty Dumpty, the two eggs have fallen, the eggs are all over the feet, and they do not have a solution. If they did, they would have put it into work by now. They threw $600 billion at the banks. What did they do with it? They didn't reinvest it because they can't make a profit anymore by reinvesting it. So they go overseas, they take the jobs there. God bless the workers overseas, but they're the ones that are being victimized because we fought for good conditions here, and we put a bullet in their head if they try to organize a union there. And we've seen it over and again. What happened in Honduras? I'm going to end on that point. Just think internationally that we are not alone and that our struggle, everything we do here for workers' rights and for advancement of workers' struggles is repercussions around the world. That's why around the world, wherever you go, workers know about the ILWU and the actions that they have taken in defense of other workers, against the war, in defense of the South African, against the South African apartheid for Mumia Abu-Jamal, and in defense of Oscar Grant's justice. They bring it all together, and we have to stand with them. Thank you very much.